Alrighty guys, I know it's been a while. I want to apologize for not putting out a lot of tutorials lately. I've just been super busy, but a lot of you guys have asked me about this. Now I do want to go ahead and go over as much as I possibly can on how I created this blend juice animation. I think it came out really good, super realistic. I put a lot of hard work and effort into this, and it was like over a week project. So I just want to go ahead and go over the document real quick and then try to break it down into steps so that you can also recreate something like this for yourself. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to be recording this without my face at the moment, and I want to kind of break down this project for us. Now, the very first step here would actually be modeling this. So in terms of modeling, I actually just used some primitives in Blender. I used a couple of cylinders, I used a plane for the logo, and then this right here is, I believe, a Bezier curve that's just extruded. So the materials obviously play a huge role as well, but in terms of modeling this actually wasn't too difficult. Now, there is one thing that I didn't model, and those are the actual water droplets themselves. As you guys can see here, they came out really good, and they added a really nice realistic effect to our bottle. However, I didn't actually model these. I used a geometry nodes-based add-on to actually create those and generate those. So, unfortunately, I can't offer you that because it is a paid add-on, which I will be linking in the description below. However, I will show you guys how it works and how to set it up on an object. I will be offering this actual file, but just without the geometry nodes add-on, because again, I can't sell that because it is not mine to sell. However, I will sell you guys the actual bottle, the lighting setup, the camera work, the depth of field, all the render settings, everything like that will all be included in my Blender file, which I will be listing on Gumroad. All right, very first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to show you guys how to model something like this. We're going to do kind of a basic version of this, but again, I will be selling this template on Gumroad so you guys can use the exact bottle that I have. So let's go ahead and open up a new document here. And this is probably how you go about modeling something like this. Go ahead and add a mesh. We're going to go ahead and add a cylinder. And one of the things I really like to do when I'm modeling with a cylinder is I like to add the edge split modifier and then our subdivision surface modifier. Right click, go ahead and shade that smooth. Now, towards the top here, we don't really need this top portion, so we could delete this face. But one of the things I like to do is to go to my side view in edit mode here and just add some loop cuts. And this is how I'll start shaping the bottle. So for example, towards the bottom, I'll probably add a loop cut right there. I'll go ahead and highlight the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and switch to X-ray mode, highlight these vertices. I'm just going to scale them in a little bit. And then I'm going to add another loop cut right here. And you can see as I do that and I bring that down, we can kind of shape the bottom of the bottle here. Now it's a little bit janky right now, but we'll go ahead and fix that in a bit. I'm going to add another subdiv to that. So far, so good. I'm also going to go ahead and tab back into edit mode, switch out of X-ray. Go ahead and select that face. Press I on the keyboard for inset, and I'm just going to go ahead and inset that face a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another loop cut right here. Kind of place that however you. I think that looks perfect. Scale it out just a little bit. Now, again, this is totally up to you guys how you want to shape this. I'm just showing you a very base level version of how to do this. I'm going to switch over to my vertices select mode, and I'm just going to go ahead and extrude this part up, make it a little bit taller, and then I'm going to extrude it up one more time on the Z-axis, and I'm going to start scaling this in a little. I'm going to move it down, and then I'm going to extrude it up one more time on the Z-axis. Again, I'm just using E as the shortcut here. And so far, so good. This is looking pretty nice. Now, one thing I am actually going to do is I'm going to tab out of edit mode. Tab back into edit mode. Go to my face select mode. Delete this top face here. Pressing X to delete. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab out of edit mode. And I'm actually going to add a solidify model. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the thickness. And what we're doing here is we're actually giving this bottle some thickness so that when we actually go to render it, it'll actually look like it has a glass surface. Not only the glass surface, but it's actually going to have some thickness, which it should. Now, in this case right here, I think I'm actually going to also try to add a bevel modifier. I'm going to go ahead and add that all the way at the top here. Now, as you can see, you're going to get some really weird things going on. So be careful where you put that. Go ahead and experiment a little bit with where you actually put the modifier. Actually doesn't seem to be doing what I wanted it to do, so I think I'm just going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to select this edge loop by clicking one of the edges, select loops, edge loops. I'm going to scale it a little bit, and then I'm going to bevel it using Control B. And I'm going to go ahead and add, by scrolling, I can actually kind of give this a bevel with a few different segments. I think that looks nice. And I think I might do the same towards the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of these edges, go to select loops, edge loops, control B to bevel, and just give it just a little bit of a rounded bottom. I think that looks perfect. I think the only thing really left to do is also bevel this edge here. Again, this is not going to be exactly like my bottle, but I will be selling that file so that you guys can utilize that. Perfect. Okay, I think this is looking pretty good. The only other thing I can really think of is to maybe scale all this in towards the top, but I think this is good just for this specific example. And if you ever need to, you can switch over to X-ray mode and you can just kind of scale all of these things in like that. Like if you wanted the cap to be kind of right above this piece, you could probably do something like that. And remember, you can scale on the Z-axis as well. Just be careful. Make sure you go ahead and bring that area up so it doesn't get weird geometry towards the bottom. This looks pretty good. Again, this is not going to be exactly like mine was. In fact, I think I'm just going to bring this up a little bit higher. Go ahead and make sure everything's looking good. Go to my X-ray mode and maybe just give that last area right there. Let's go ahead and select that edge loop. Let's just go ahead and bevel that just a little bit. Give it a little bit more subtlety. Oops. Not too much, though. And we'll go ahead and cut that back just like... You're giving me a hard time. There we go. Perfect. All right. I think that looks great. Switch out of X-ray mode. Let me just go ahead and save this. So I don't lose this work. I'm just going to save this as bottle. Go ahead and save that. Perfect. This is looking pretty good. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the cap. So I actually brought our other cap in here just so I can show you guys an example. So it's kind of nice to have this model right next to the one that I'll be creating next. I don't remember exactly how I made this, but if I remember certain parts, if we go to add mesh, you're going to see this little thing called bolt here. Now, if you don't, you should be able to go up to your preferences, just search for extra, and then right here, just go ahead and check those two. Extra curves, we're going to need that, and extra mesh. Go ahead and click on those, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in my bolt. Now, as you can see, we have a bolt. And then if you click on this little drop down on the bottom left, we're going to have all these crazy different measurements and things that we can adjust. In our case, we're actually going to be deleting most of it. We're just going to be using this kind of curved part because it's a lot easier to not have to model that, right? So right now, I'm just changing the thread length. I think that's perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and click away to confirm that. Bring this up. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and let's go ahead and delete the stuff we don't need. So I'm going to go to my side view here, switch over to X-ray mode. I'm going to go to my vertices select. I think I'm going to delete as much as I can off the top. That looks good. And then I did actually miss a layer there. Perfect. Now we kind of have something like this. I'm also going to go ahead and flatten off the bottom as well. To do that, there's a couple ways we could do that. It's already flat, but I don't need this many turns. So I'm going to actually tab out of edit mode, add a subdivision surface. I'm going to add a mesh cube, and we're just going to go ahead and cut the bottom off with a boolean here. So as you can see, this is kind of where we get to decide, okay, how big do we want this object to be? I only want it to have maybe a couple of turns, just like that. So go ahead and click on our screw again, add a boolean, difference, click on your cube, hide your cube, and that looks pretty close to what I have over here. So I think we're going to go ahead and apply the boolean here. You can actually go ahead and apply that. Now be careful because you will get artifacts like that. So I'm actually going to remove the subdivision first. Go ahead and apply my boolean. Check on that geometry. It looks good. Now as you can see, the top's not filled here. So in order to fill that, we're going to go ahead and tab into edit mode. So just select all of those top vertices. Just be careful. Don't accidentally select some that aren't on the top. For example, these ones right here. I think I have everything selected properly. Let me go ahead and double check. Now, if you, oh, you gotta switch over to X-ray mode. I'm sorry, guys. That's my mistake. All right, so let's go ahead and highlight everything in X-ray mode so that we get both sides. And then if you press F, what that's gonna do is it's actually gonna fill the top in with a face. And just like that, we start to have a cap. Now, one of the things we're gonna wanna do, of course, as always, is probably gonna wanna bevel this. Before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and inset it a little bit, just give it some more geometry to work with here. Go ahead and add a subdivision surface. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to 2. Now, as you can see, we're getting a lot of distortion. That's because of that kind of spiral effect. So if you really want to, you can go back and you can actually cut the top off. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this. I'm going to go to add mesh cube again, and I'm just going to cut the top off. Now, I really like working with booleans. A lot of people are probably going to go ahead and hate on this, but I just think they're so easy to work with. That's always what I do. I'm not huge on modeling. That's not really something I cover a lot. And as you can see, just like that, I have exactly what I want with no modeling. So this is perfect. I have my subdivision. Now, if you go ahead and shade that smooth, it's going to look really nice. And again, we can go ahead and unhide our cube, and we can cut off the bottom just one more time. Go ahead and add a boolean here. Bring this up a little bit. Hide it, see how that looks. That's fine. I'm good with that for the purposes of this tutorial. Now, as you can see, I actually didn't even realize this before, but I actually did not make this a hollow cap. You guys can if you want. You can go ahead and cut a cylinder out of it and make it an actual cap shape. But in my actual render, I didn't need it to be like that, so I did not go with that. Now, if you look at the geometry of what I have for my actual cap from my render, you can see that it's very intricate, and that's because I actually took it into sculpting mode. The next thing we're going to want to do before we start like applying materials and stuff like that, guys, is we're actually going to put these little ridges. You guys see these little ridges? There's a really special way we're going to do that, and we're going to be using a boolean to do that. And then we're going to take this whole thing in here as one single mesh into sculpting mode, and we're going to kind of smooth it out. And I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. But let's go ahead, and I want to show you guys how we're going to add these little tiny ridges into our bottle cap. All right, so how do we actually add these ridges? It's actually pretty simple, and I thought of this really clever way to do it. You guys have probably used a method like this before. Go ahead and add a cylinder. Now, we're actually going to be cutting into this with an array of cylinders. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring my cylinder up here like this. I'm going to actually center it on the Y and the X. We can keep it at that Z axis level. Go ahead and add in a curve, and we're just going to use a circle curve, bring that up, scale it out to about the diameter of your cap here. That looks good. Go ahead and click on your cylinder, add an array. I'm just going to give this a couple counts here, and then add a curve modifier. This is where the magic happens. So go ahead and select your Bezier curve, and now check this out. As we add to our array, you can see that we're actually adding different ridges. Now, this is kind of the part where you can decide how big these ridges want to be. I'm going to actually scale mine up on the Z a little bit. I think that's good. I'm also going to give them a little bit of space. I don't want them to be right on top of each other. And I'm going to go ahead and add as many as I think I need. That looks pretty good. Again, I'm kind of going with 30 here, 1.1 on the X value. Now, this is, again, where you're going to have to experiment and figure out how big you want these things to be. Because right now, that was way too big, what I had before. Let's go ahead and scale this up on the Z, bring it up, scale it just a little bit more, and let's go ahead and space these out. But let's go ahead and holding shift, I'm going to add more. Looks pretty darn good. Just be careful not to add too many. You can see I have 89 right now. This is looking really good. Now you just kind of need to go ahead and scale everything in. Now in our case, you might be able to just scale the actual curve itself. If I scale the curve in, you can see that what we want is we want these to barely be scraping the surface here so that they're going to cut right in just a little bit, just about that. Now, when you do this, remember, you're going to have to reduce your array. Now I have about 82. Let's go ahead and adjust this very finely. And that looks pretty much perfect. Now, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and click on Apply for your cylinder, and then you're going to want to cut a boolean. So let me go quickly save this, make sure Blender doesn't crash on me here. You should be good. Go ahead and click on your cap, add a boolean modifier, select your cylinders, go ahead and hide your cylinders. Now, this is the part where you got to watch out, because I kind of figured this was going to happen. I'm actually going to tab into edit mode on my cap. I'm going to bring this face up. Oops, just this top face. Go ahead and select the top face in edit mode, bring it up. You can also extrude it if you want to. And I think I'm going to add actually might add a remesh modifier to this. Press escape, tab out of edit mode. Now before we add this boolean, let's just add a remesh modifier. I'm going to click on smooth, and I think I'm going to use 7 for the voxel size. Actually, let's go with 8. Go ahead and apply that. Now, if we apply our boolean to our hidden cylinder object, which is right there, we should be good to go. Up. All right, let's go again. We are getting a little bit of glitchiness, which we shouldn't be. Sometimes you have to mess or I know why it's happening. Apologies, guys. The reason that's happening is because we never added a bevel to our cylinders. The bullion is cutting properly, but we never added a bevel to our cylinders, so it's going to be just flat at the top where it's cutting in there. But you know what? We can still work with this. Go ahead and apply the bullion here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this. I'm actually going to tab into edit mode, just check out the geometry. It's looking good. This is where the real fun happens. Head over to the sculpting tab here. Now, as you can see, this is our original cap, and this is the cap we just made. Go ahead and switch over to the smooth tool, and it looks kind of like this right here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and scale this radius up a bit, and let's just watch what happens when I do this. Interesting. It gets rid of everything. Now, that's not what we want. Go ahead and click on remesh, and let's choose a value of 0.03. Click on remesh. I'm going to undo that and choose a higher value. Instead of 0.03, let's try 0.01. Click on remesh. Now, if you look, we have a little bit more geometry to work with. And if we turn our strength down on our smooth tool, I'm thinking 0.25, and we go ahead and run over this stuff, now look what happens when we run over these edges. Now, this process can take a little while depending on how tedious you want to be, but this is where you can really make your cap look realistic. This is where you can add all types of smoothness to the cap. You can add a few dents in sculpting mode, and I think a lot of people overlook this, which is totally fine. But me personally, I was trying to put as much effort as I could into this. And as you can see, all of these ridges are really smooth, just kind of like how they would be on the cap. And then what you can kind of see here, you might think I messed up. I actually kind of did that on purpose there. I wanted the cap to be just a little bit more worn down right there. Now, this also can apply to the ridges here. I'm going to go ahead and smooth those out. I think I'm going to bump the strength up as I do that. And it just kind of smooths the cap out. Now, you guys can smooth this out as much as you want. The other thing you can do is you can actually go ahead and add some dents in here with the other sculpting tools. You can turn your strength up even more. Let's say you want it to be really, really smooth. You can see I'm really smoothing out these edges here of this screw shape, or what was once a screw shape. And it's starting to look really good. Just be careful, because you can see at the bottom, it's going to start to distort things. Just be careful like how you use these sculpting tools. I'm going to go ahead back to my layout, and I am pretty happy with that. Now, it's not exactly like this one. I think I added a little bit more of a bevel to the top of that cap, but for the most part, that is pretty much what you're getting. If you did want to have that bevel without going back into editing mode, you could go ahead and do something like this. Just be careful. You're going to want to adjust the radius of your brush size, but you can see you can kind of start to add that bevel back. Just be careful again, because you're going to affect your ridges. But like I said, guys, right now it's pretty sharp. You can soften it back up. I think this looks really good. Again, I'm going to be giving you guys this file. It's going to be maybe like $1 or so. I'm not really sure how much I'm going to sell it for, but you can have this actual cap file if you want it. So we have our bottle, we have our cap. Now, obviously the cap is a little bit big, so let's go ahead and go to our side view, bring it down, maybe scale it. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set the origin to the geometry, so that when we do scale it, it scales in a way that makes more sense. There we go. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's how you make a bottle and a cap. Now, again, this is not going to be exactly how I made everything, because I think I made it like a couple of months ago. But for the most part, this is what you get. I'm going to do my very best to go through all of the next steps. Again, this is pretty much most of the modeling. The only thing left modeling-wise is the logo, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. All right, since the logo is really the only other part of the modeling that I need to cover, I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you guys how to do that. Well, we're going to go ahead and add the logo the same way you would add any image or video into Blender. You could use nodes, but in this case, I'm actually going to add an image as planes right here. Now, if you don't see this, it is an add-on and it's free, don't worry, and it comes with Blender. Go ahead and click on that. I'm going to go ahead to my random folder. Now, in this case, I can just pick pretty much anything I want. Let's go ahead and go with something that kind of makes sense for this. All right, the Blender logo. Now, this is not the one that I used. I actually photoshopped my own version of the logo to make a fake brand for the drink. I'm going to go ahead and click on import. And as you can see, there it is right there. I'm going to move it on the x-axis, and let's just go ahead and switch over to material preview so we can actually see our logo. Now, one of the things we're going to do is we're actually not going to be doing any UV mapping, anything like that. I don't really like that stuff, so I'm going to do this in a way that makes more sense for me. I'm going to go ahead and tab into edit mode on this plane. I'm going to subdivide the crap out of it, probably maybe 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times. That should be fine. And now what we're going to do, and there's a lot of ways to do this. You could use a shrink wrap modifier. I've seen a lot of people do that. I'm actually going to go ahead and switch over to the random coloration from my viewport. I'm going to bring this really super close to the edge here. Now, I just want to show you guys a couple of options we have. You could use the shrink wrap modifier. I personally don't like the shrink wrap modifier. Now, you can use it if you want and just adjust the offset as needed. I just personally don't like this method. I'm not sure why. Again, it works. You can see there's like a little bit of distortion that has to do with the subdivision levels, things like that. Don't forget to also shade smooth. You're going to get a little bit of wonkiness with the shrink wrap modifier. I find it's easier to just use a curve. So I'm going to go ahead and add a curve. Bezier curve is fine. I'm going to bring it up, scale it beyond my bottle. That looks pretty good. I'm going to click on my plane, my image plane here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on curve, Bezier circle. And now this is the part where you're going to need to actually click on the correct axis. Z, we're going to try Z negative. You know what else we need to do, guys? We're going to actually probably need to apply the scale as well. There we go. Oops. Yeah, this can be a little bit tricky to get. There we go. All right, so again, this is why you need to find the correct axis. Y might work. It's going to be a little bit wonky. Give me 1 second to get this correct. All right, apologies about that, guys. This can be a little bit of a tricky modifier. I'm not sure why. I probably just don't understand it as much as I should. But what I did is actually rotated the logo until it started to look correct. And then I used the negative Y deform axis. I do think part of the reason there was a couple of glitches happening there is because you have to apply your transforms, like your rotation and your actual location transforms. For some reason, Blender just does these things a little bit strangely. Now, you could apply this modifier. I wouldn't. The reason why is because you can actually still scale this out and in. And you can see, like, I believe you can also kind of rotate this. Yeah, just be careful because you can see as you rotate it, it's going to go ahead and distort the logo a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. In this case, you can start to kind of move this closer to the bottle until it's barely touching it. Just be careful because if you move it too close, you can see you start to get some clipping here, and you don't want that. Trust me, it's going to completely break the illusion that this is a label. And I'm going to show you guys how to add even more dimension to this label in a little bit using some really, really clever node setups that I've developed. You guys have probably used similar techniques, but again, this is pretty much how to slap that logo on the bottle. I used my own custom logo, but again, this is just an image as planes. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next step, and that's going to be lighting. Now, believe it or not, guys, the lighting is actually pretty simple here. I'm going to go ahead and paste in the exact lighting that I used for the last shot. Now, I just want to go ahead and go over this. I'm not going to go over how to set this up, but you guys can copy all of my necessary settings. These are area lights. What I did is I added an area light on each side of our actual scene here. You can see that it kind of surrounds the bottle. Now, you can see there's also a backplate here, and this backplate's really important, and I'm going to show you why. Let's go ahead and grab our camera. I'm going to go ahead and move it over here, rotate it properly, and I'm just going to go ahead and face my subject. Snap to the camera. Now, you're going to want to use cycles for this, guys. I think that was already pretty clear. Right? I'm just going to go ahead and zero this out. Perfect. Now we are perfectly facing our subject. Let's go to rendered view. And we're on cycles, GPU. Yep. Now, as you can see, it doesn't look too crazy yet. And there's a couple of reasons why. One of the reasons is because the scale and the actual object itself. So right now, this isn't glass. Let's just go ahead and add a quick glass shader. Don't worry, I'll go over all the details later. All right, I'm going to give that 0 roughness, snap back to the camera. Now you can already see kind of what's happening here, guys. Notice how cool this lighting already looks. Go ahead and give your bottle cap a metallic shader. I'm just going to give it a low roughness for now. Again, we're going to come back to all of this stuff. The only thing really left to do is to kind of rotate everything around. I'm actually going to go ahead and apply my curve. I'm going to right click, set origin to 3D cursor, so I can just kind of rotate this around until it's facing the camera. Good. Let's just go ahead and take a quick look at that. Now, as you guys can see, there's a little bit of strange things happening with this geometry, so go ahead and try to shade smooth. If that doesn't work, we can always come back to this. Again, it's going to also depend on the object that you clipped it to. And I think one of the reasons this is happening is because the Bezier curve that I used, I want to say that it was not subdivided enough. So I will go ahead and redo that because I want you guys to have the best quality tutorial. Again, I didn't even notice this earlier. I apologize. So let's go ahead and fix that. I apologize if you guys already applied that modifier, but if we go ahead and click on the plane, you'll notice that it has these weird shapes in it. If you click on the Bezier curve, you're going to want to adjust this resolution value. This should fix it. I'm just going to go ahead and raise it up to 64. And then if you apply your modifier, you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and switch over to rendered view. Right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Go to my top down view here. Sorry, my camera view. And I'm just going to rotate this around. As you guys can see, that looks much better. Now, the higher the resolution, the smoother the logo is going to come out. Again, I want to apologize. I didn't even notice that as I was running you guys through the steps. Now, as you can see, with just a point light in the back, bring this down, you can see that as I adjust where it is, how crazy this lighting can get. Now, there's not even liquid in this yet, and this already looks cool. Now, one of the keys to this lighting setup, there's a couple of things. One is the actual radius of this light in the back. You can see that as I adjust the radius, you get a completely different effect depending on the actual value there. The other thing is the actual material of the background is going to greatly affect the way that everything looks. This is if it was white. This is if it was maybe a little bit of a darker gray. And of course, this is like nothing. There's no light bouncing off this. It's too dark. We're going to want to go with kind of a middle ground here. I might even make it a little bit brighter, just so we get more of an emphasis on that actual kind of blurred background effect. One of the things I really like to do when I'm rendering, guys, or when I'm working in 3D is I actually like to go to my camera settings here on the right, and I like to adjust this value, which is going to go ahead and kind of narrow us in on our scene here. That way we're not distracted with any other elements in our scene. I'm also going to hide my other bottle cap. As you guys can see, this is not going to look exactly like my other file, but I am going to switch over so I can show you guys how similar they are. This was my original one. You can see the bottle's a little bit taller. Now, another thing that I did is I zoomed in really, really far into the bottle so that more of the background was kind of covered in that white effect. But as you guys can see, the lighting is almost identical. Another thing I'm going to do is click on the camera and go ahead and try to zoom in here. I'm probably going to give this 120 millimeter lens. And then I'm going to back up on the Y-axis, and I'm going to go ahead and move down. Now, as you can see, we have a much tighter shot here, and you can see that the background fills in a lot more. This is kind of how you get these types of effects. Now, remember, with our bottle, we should be able to go back and adjust the actual solidify modifier. Now, right now, my IOR for my glass is 1.45. Look what happens when we adjust the thickness of the glass. Look how much different you can make this glass look just by adjusting the thickness of the walls. Now, we'll probably go with something realistic like this. That looks pretty good. Now, another thing we can do with the lighting, since we have this all set up, this does look good. And if you guys are happy with this, go ahead and use this. But another thing that I want to do to kind of fill in those extra areas is add an HDRI. Because right now, our background is just gray, which is fine if that's what you're looking for. But I typically like to have more details and reflections in my objects. I want it to look like it's really there in real life. In order to do that, we're going to use a real life background image that was actually taken for this exact purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this little world properties icon. I'm going to go to my color here, this little dot, click on environment texture, and I'm going to go ahead and click on open. I'm going to go to my environment textures folder, and I'll probably choose one of these studio setups. Let's try this one and see how it looks. Now, if we snap to the camera, you can see that we have a lot more stuff reflecting here. Now, it's a little bit brighter. So one of the things that I really like to do, and I've showed you guys this before, is if we hop over to our shading tab, we zoom out here, you can see our node setup. If I snap to my camera and I click on world down here, you can see this is our HDRI right here. Now, in order to rotate this, we're going to add a mapping node and a texture coordinate node. I'm going to plug in my generated to the vector and the vector into the vector. I'm going to switch over to rendered view, and I'm just going to go ahead and go over to my animation tab. What I'm going to do is I am going to switch this around just a little bit. Show you guys what I mean. I'm going to make this bottom panel the shader editor, click on world, and I'm just going to make sure everything's rotating. Go ahead and take a look at the glass here. As I rotate this Z value, notice how the reflections in the glass are going to change. And you can see the entire world is rotating. So what we can do is we can find where we really like this. Looks pretty good. We don't want there to be too much light, but we still want these reflections. You can really notice it in the cap. If you zoom in on the cap here and you start to rotate this world around, you can see that the reflections are moving across the cap. I kind of like this middle ground here. I think that looks nice. Again, you guys can experiment with whatever you want. You don't even have to use a studio background. You could use this outdoor background. But again, now look at what you're getting. You're not really getting that same result. So I'm going to undo that, stick with my studio background, and let's go ahead and move forward and start adding more details to this project. All right, let's go ahead and add some liquid to the bottle. That's definitely something that we're missing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to X-ray mode here. It's just going to help a little bit while we do this. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Mesh Cube. Now, you're probably wondering why I chose a cube, just because it's the simplest shape that I can think of to use for this. I'm going to go ahead and choose the water level. As you guys probably can guess here, we're going to be using some booleans here. I think something like that should be pretty good. Now, there's going to be a few little tricky things I use here. Obviously, the very first thing I'm going to do is choose boolean. I'm going to select my bottle. Now, this is where this is going to get kind of interesting. I'm going to click on fast as well. I'm going to apply this, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and press the slash key on my keyboard. And what that's going to do is just narrow us in on just this object. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm just going to delete everything I don't need here, because I kind of want the inverse of what we have right now, if that makes sense. Go ahead and switch out of X-ray mode. I'm just going to go ahead and start deleting these faces here. Now, I kind of just want this inside piece. And a little clever trick that I learned is if you click on this top face and click L, you can actually separate this out. So I'm going to right click, separate by loose parts. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start deleting the things I don't need. And this is pretty much the only thing I need. I didn't realize it got this last part here. So I could go ahead and do one more Boolean operation and just cut it off, which I'm going to do. Now, I wanted the exact cylinder size, so that's why I used a Boolean. You could have just used a cylinder. That would work too, but I like to do things a little bit differently. So I'm going to go ahead and add a Boolean. I'm going to select this. I'm going to hide it, and then I'm going to apply. So now, if we go ahead and press slash again, and we go to X-ray mode and select the inside, you can see that this is now going to be our fluid. Go ahead back to render view. You can see it's just kind of an object. There's really not much going on with it. This is where we can start to play around with some materials, but for right now, I'm going to give this a glass shader with kind of like an orange type of color, maybe like a lighter orange like that, and then 1.33 for our IOR. Raise the roughness a little bit, shade it smooth, snap to my camera, and let's just see what that looks like. I think I'm going to give this a little bit more saturation here. Now, one of the things we can do is, you notice how I scaled this in here? I just scaled this in. You're going to want to actually scale it out a little bit. The reason why is I was actually researching online, and I learned that if you scale it out just a little bit, it actually makes it look more full. And it does something to the glass that you're definitely going to want to do. So for right now, that is our liquid, as you guys can see. Now don't forget, you can move your logo up. If you want a little more space for that, that's fine. And with your liquid, what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of add a little bit of surface roughness and kind of some distortion. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So far though, I think this is looking really good. Again, you can bring this stuff into sculpting mode and you can really go ahead and sculpt it yourself. I know this doesn't look exactly like the one I had. That is because I just don't remember how exactly I modeled it. You guys can kind of start to get the gist of how I did all of that stuff just by kind of watching this. So we have our cap, we have our bottle, we have our fluid, and we have our logo. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and start adding some more details. Alrighty guys, it is time to introduce this add-on. It's called Droplet Generator. It is currently, at the time of recording this video, $35 by Palm Pixel. So quick shout out to them. I will be linking this in the description. Now, this is one of the reasons that this render came out so good, or at least in my opinion, came out so good. There are a ton of features available. And what's really cool, and I hadn't even really used this before, is you can actually weight paint and decide where you want your water droplets to be. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. This is my original file right here. And as you can see, go ahead and snap to rendered view. This is looking fantastic. I'm so proud of what I did, because I did spend a lot of time and energy on this. As you guys can see, the water droplets are looking fantastic. Now, here are my settings that I used on the right. Again, I can't sell you this, and I can't give you this because it's not mine to give. You guys can go ahead and purchase it. These are some of the settings I used. I'm just going to go ahead and slowly scroll. You guys can take a look at that. Okay. Now, I do want to show you how I used the weight painting because it was actually pretty simple. I didn't think it would be, but it was. You can see there's these little buttons on the side here. I believe it's this one. Yep. So right here, you can actually select a weight paint that you saved for your actual object, and you can decide where you want specific water drops to be and where you don't want them. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my bottle that we were working on for this tutorial. I know, not as fun as the other one, definitely not as well modeled, but here it is. Now, if you go ahead and click up here, you know you have object mode, edit mode, sculpt mode, but not a lot of people talk about weight paint. I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to that. As you can see, the entire bottle is blue, and if we start drawing on it with this weight paint brush, you can pretty much use this, what I'm creating right here, to decide where you do and don't want your water droplets to be. Now, let's say you go ahead and complete this. What you would then do is go back to object mode. You would go to your modifiers. Now, again, this is when you have the geometry nodes add-on that I cannot show you right now because it's not mine to show. This is where you would select, go save this. I'm going to go back to product display. This right here on the side is where you would add in that weight paint. Now, when you add it on, you might have to experiment a little bit. You might have to invert it. I think towards the bottom, let me go ahead and check what I did for this one. Let's go to weight paint. You can see that at the bottom where the blue is, that is where the water droplets will not be. And then towards the top, you can see that they start to get generated in those more red areas. So that's kind of how the weight painting works. Remember, if you guys need to invert, you can go up here, click on weights and invert, and that's going to flip everything. So if I click on invert, now all the water droplets are going to be at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and undo that because I actually want them to be towards the top. There was a lot of controversy on Reddit and other platforms about if there should be water droplets and frost. So I'm just going to still show you guys how to add that frost in because I thought it was a really cool effect. So I know a lot of people were debating whether or not there should be both. You guys don't have to add both, but I'm still going to show you how to do it all. So yeah, that's the water droplets, guys. Again, you guys are more than welcome to copy all of my settings. You can do the same weight painting that I did. I just kind of wanted to show you guys how I did that. There are other ways I'm sure you could use without buying an add-on, but this add-on is just so simple and easy to use that I had to shout it out. So there's the add-on for the water droplets. Let's go ahead and move on to the carbonation. So you're probably wondering, how did I get carbonation? Well, this is how I did it. I started out with a image plane. I wrapped it around a curve, and then I did some fancy node editing. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you the nodes first, and it'll make a lot of sense. Right here, we have our image. Now, if I go ahead and press play, you're not going to see much because you're only going to be able to see it in material preview. But I go ahead and zoom in here and I play this. Notice what's happening here. Do you guys see these bubbles, quote unquote bubbles moving? What I did was I found a video that worked great for this, right? I found a video with a black background and I said, you know what? That kind of looks like bubbles. What if I can just cut out the black, keep the bubbles, and then wrap it around in 3D to create a quote unquote fake carbonation effect? Now, I thought this was pretty genius, so that's what I did. As you guys can see, this is the node setup right here. It's just the principled BSDF with a mix shader, and I'm simply mixing the image itself or the video and a transparent BSDF. Now, the transparent BSDF is basically going to replace whatever the black is with nothing so that you can see right through it. As you can see in rendered view, it works just fine. You guys can see that this works great. Now you're probably wondering, okay, but can you make it smaller? Can you make it shorter? This and that? Yes, you can. You can scale this. You can cut it off with a Boolean. What I did is I think I created something that was like half this size, and then I simply applied this exact technique with this video. Now, as you can see, if you zoom in and I adjust this color ramp, you can kind of see that you can cut more or less away. Another thing that I believe I did on the original is I added one more mix shader like this, and then I actually mixed in an emission for the other part, and I plugged the FAC back in. Yep, there we go. So as you guys can see, again, I know this looks complicated, or maybe it doesn't to you if you're familiar with nodes. Let me just go ahead and put these all together so you can see. But this setup is relatively simple. And what we have here now, if we press play, is we have sort of this quote-unquote carbonation effect. really simply. And I actually got this for free offline. I believe it was from Pexels, and this was a royalty free video. As you can see, the frames kind of update slowly here, but it's kind of hard to see. I apologize for that, guys, in this little window, but the video plays well and it works fantastically. It's a really simple way to do this without using a particle system. Originally, I was going to use a particle system. I decided to use this method instead because I thought it was just so clever, and it looked great. Let me go ahead and play it for you one more time so you guys can actually see what that looks like, because when I did render this out, where is the close-up here? Give me 1 second while this loads. The actual rendered version of this looks absolutely fantastic. My computer's running really slow right now, but as soon as it loads this up, I will play this video for you. Right, here it is right here. If we watch the actual video, you can see, if you look really, really close here, you can see that the carbonation does look good, but if you really, really look close, frame by frame, you can tell that it's not real, right? But it doesn't matter because we were able to fake it in a way that makes it look real, right? And this is kind of the stuff that I wish people talked about more, is you don't always have to use Blender's built-in stuff. You can use your own workaround version that works for you. In my case, I used a video and I actually just cut out the background. And as you can see, when I press play, it looks fantastic. Now, in terms of actually adding this to the bottle, I'm just going to actually copy this, go back to our original bottle. All right. I'm going to paste this in here and I'm going to scale it up. Now, let's just go ahead to render view real quick so I can see. As you can see, it's working great. I press play. It's playing. It's a little bit laggy in rendered view, but this is the part where I have to go to my side view and I have to scale this in. This is kind of the like a little bit trickier part. I'm also going to scale it on the Z-axis. Scale it in just a little bit so that it's like about the size of the liquid. And then in this case, you would probably want to do a test render. But if you zoom in, you can see right here that we do have those little particles or air bubbles. Whatever you guys want to put in there, you can put in there. I think this looks perfect, so I went with this. And as you can see, if I press play, it's going to be a little bit laggy. But you can notice how the bubbles are actually rising from the bottom. Now you're also going to want to play with your mapping too. I won't go too much into this, but if you go and select your object in the shader editor. Oops. Guys, hold on 1 second. Here's, oh no, where is it? Go to my X-ray mode and select that. There we go. You're going to want to play with mapping. Now, I don't actually have mapping hooked up, but you can hook it up to this little vector point right here, and you can adjust this in a similar way that I adjusted our HDRI. So far, though, this is looking really good, and I'm very pleased with how this is coming out so far. Let's go ahead and get into some details for the bottle and actually adding some like roughness variation to the bottle. All right, so before you guys freak out, I promise you this isn't as crazy as it looks. I guess it's kind of crazy, but this is what it took to kind of make that bottle look the way that it did. I'm using a lot of image textures here. Just a quick overview, using a lot of image textures, using a lot of mapping. I'm using some color ramps, some mixed shaders. This took quite a long time to figure out how to make this look correct. I'm going to try my best to go over kind of like what's happening here. I'm going to break it down per image texture. So at the very end, obviously we have our material output, but before that we have a mix shader. Now, what am I mixing here? Well, I'm mixing a glass BADSF almost always. So in terms of this roughness here, this variation up here, let me find which one is controlling that. I believe it is this one. Yep, it's this one. All right, so right here, guys, I have an image. Now, this image is just simply an image of roughness. I'm going to show you guys kind of what that looks like. If I scroll through here, you can see we actually have our frost image right up here. Now, these are all free images that I got offline, but in terms of our actual roughness, I believe I use something like these. So you're going to want to find images that kind of look like this, and all you have to do, believe it or not, hook them up to a texture coordinate and mapping node, hook them up to a color ramp, and then just plug them into your roughness. I'm going to show you what happens if I unplug this roughness here. It's just going to look like glass, right? So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to rendered view. So it's just going to look like glass. But as soon as I plug the color of that image into the roughness, now we have all this variation in the glass. So we can kind of create this fake condensation look just with an image texture. It's super, super powerful, Not a lot of people are covering this, or maybe they are, and I just haven't seen the videos. But look how cool that looks, especially when I go to my, or is it my close-up shot here? When I go to my close-up shot, you can really see the variation in the glass. Zoom out. Look at that. You can see, like, right here, it looks pretty darn realistic. Go ahead and click on my bottle again. Now, another thing, guys, is you're going to want to make sure you set your image texture to non-color, and you're going to have to play around with the color ramp. As you guys can see, if I mess around with this color ramp and I bring it all the way down, watch what happens to my roughness. It doesn't look good, and that's because you have to fine-tune these things. A lot of people think it's just plug and play, and for the most part, it is, but you do have to play around with these values to get what you're looking for. Everything you see here took me probably 3 or 4 hours to get the way that I wanted, to the point where I was very satisfied with the result. And I think this result is exactly what I was looking for. Now, in this case right here, I also plugged in a color ramp to the mix shader so that I could further fine tune kind of where everything happened. Let me go ahead back to my wide shot here. Now, if I click on my bottle again, I want to show you guys how I did this frost, because this is really what everyone was asking for, was, Kenny, how did you do the frost? How did you do it? To be honest, guys, I got kind of lucky with my image textures. I actually found an image texture that was perfect for this. I believe it was this one right here on the left, or this one. One of these two. I'm going to try my best to link them. But anyway, I used that image texture. I not only plugged it into the mix shader as an FAC, but I also plugged it into the roughness of the glass, and to take it a step further, I plugged it into the bump. So what that's going to do right there is that's actually going to make it look like you can reach out and touch this frost. And to be honest, I was so impressed at how well it came out. I was actually taken back, because if you zoom in, even like really far, like this far, it just looks so good. It looks like it's actually covering the surface, and that ice crystallized right here. So it looks really, really nice. Now, another cool thing that we can do, that I did right here, is, as you guys can see, I have some rotational values for part of my mapping. I'm going to zoom out real quick. And if I go to my material preview, just so it's a little bit quicker, you can notice I can actually adjust the rotation of the frost. I can adjust the Z, so I can decide where the frost starts and stops. And then this right here, this color ramp, I can decide how much I want it to fade and where to start fading and stop fading. It's so powerful. And really, if you really have looked at other node setups, this actually isn't too bad. So if, let's say, you wanted the frost to fade up like a gradient more, you click this piece here, and you could do that. You could even take it as far, I mean, I don't know how I would do this, but you could animate this somehow so that the frost builds up, so it looks like it's freezing over time. Now look right here. Now look at the frost. Pardon me, guys. I apologize. I haven't talked this long in a while, but you can see that the frost is building up the glass even more. I'm going to set it back to what it was before. The other thing is, this is how you kind of get that more realistic look, where it's not just cut off. So if these two are too close together, like really, really close together, like that, I'm going to show you what that looks like, it's not going to look realistic. Why? Because it doesn't naturally fade. And with whatever temperature it would be, it would naturally fade, right? So again, you can go even one step further, and you could plug a noise texture into this as well. But right now, with just an image texture, I'm more than pleased with the result that I got. Again, this file will be available to you guys to purchase. I'm not sure about the price yet, because I did put a lot of hard work into this. But if you guys are troopers and you're willing to, you are more than welcome to copy this entire node setup. Let me see if I can get it up on the screen. Again, a lot of people don't want to go through all the steps to do this. If you do, and you don't want to pay for however much I charge for the actual Blender file, you're more than welcome to copy this. Go ahead. I'm going to try to link these two specific images here. To be honest, I don't remember what I was doing with this mapping here. I think it had to do with where the texture lied on the bottle. But that is how you add some surface roughness to the bottle, and then that's how you add the frost to the bottom. Again, the key to the frost here is our bump node. That is kind of like the hero of this situation here. I'm plugging it into the normal of the glass. So that's going to kind of make everything pop. I know this might be a lot, guys, to go over, but a lot of you guys who are familiar with nodes know exactly what's happening here. Again, you kind of have to get lucky with the texture. Let me zoom in really far and then go to render view. In my case here, I got super, super lucky with this texture, and the lighting really, really makes this frost way more pronounced. Now, I did render this at 4K, so that's another reason why it looks so good. And I have a very powerful PC behind all of this, so definitely grateful for that. But guys, either way, this is how you add frost and those little surface imperfections. Now, if you want, you can even choose something with fingerprints. It's totally up to you guys. It really is just a big experiment, and I cannot stress that enough. Every time that I go into a project, I know that I'll spend hours fine-tuning it to get the results that I want. So be patient with your process. Make sure you guys take your time. Don't rush into anything. Try different textures. Don't just settle on one just because that's what I used. Okay, guys, I really want you to have fun with this. All right, let's go ahead and move on now. Let's move on to the cap and texturing that. So I actually don't have a lot of close-up shots of this in my actual renders, but if you look, this looks really nice. I actually spent a little bit of time kind of adjusting this material. Believe it or not, this is it right here. I didn't use any image textures, nothing like that. I actually just used 2 noise textures and I messed around with the scale. Now, the scale is kind of the key component here. You guys, again, let me just leave this up on the screen so you can copy this if you want. It's pretty simple. It's just a principal BSDF with kind of a gray color, high metallic value, and then plugged into our roughness slot right here is a color ramp and just some noise textures. So if you want, go ahead and copy this. You're more than welcome to use this however you like. But the whole point here is the scale. So if I go ahead and zoom in really, really far, you can see that all this really is a bunch of lines that are scaled in a way that make them look like brushed metal. So if I adjust this scale here, this is at like 35 right now. If I adjust it back to 10, you'll notice that you kind of have the same thing, but just a little bit more stretched out. So if I bring this back up to maybe like 50, now you'll see we have this really stretched out kind of line look to our shader. So that's pretty much the key magic number right there. 50 actually doesn't look that bad. I probably could have used that value. In my case, I used 35, and I actually think it came out pretty good. So it's totally up to you guys what you want to use. I just wanted to go over that. And then another thing you're going to want to play around with is this color ramp right here. This is kind of like going to make it either darker or lighter. You can see that it doesn't really look good when you drag the white over. You can also mess around with this value too. Just be careful. You're going to get a bad result if you're not like too careful with what you do. You can also mess around with plugging this into the color as well. I personally just thought this looked really good, so I went with this. Excuse me, with this. Sorry guys, I just ate some really hot beef jerky, and it's kind of messing with my throat. But as you guys can see, this looks fantastic. It looks like brushed metal. And then you're going to have to also play around with like your coordinates. Like if you want the rotation to be different, you can do that. I thought this looked really good, so I didn't mess around with too many. Again, you're more than welcome to copy this material. That is how you make that app material. Alrighty, last but not least, guys, the logo. So you guys probably saw I had quite a few close-up shots. Let me go ahead and get to one of those really quick. Go to my close-up shot of the logo. Make sure I'm actually zoomed in on the logo here so you guys can like really see the true detail captured. All right. And I'm going to go to like frame 1. Perfect. All right, cool. So here's our logo right here. I have it selected. Now, if I zoom in here, there's actually quite a lot going on. Now, these are the nodes right here. Again, feel free to copy them. Notice right here, guys, see this little kind of darker patch? A lot of people were asking me how I did this. Again, it's just using image textures. Image textures are so incredibly underrated, it's not even funny. Again, let me go ahead and just move down a little bit. So the other thing that I want to talk about, before I get into that, because I get so sidetracked, you can kind of see that there's like an edge to this. Like it looks like it's actually like was placed on there like a sticker, which is exactly what I wanted. And I wanted it to look like a 3D label. But right here, the roughness, you guys see how I have this plugged into my roughness value? This is just a dirty glass picture. So it's literally just like a texture that I downloaded. It's similar to what I did with the frost, but in this case, I'm just plugging it right into the roughness, which is just going to give us like some variation in our logo and make it look kind of like wet, moist, and like it has actual condensation on it. And this is kind of exactly what you want because this would happen in real life. You would have that variation in that logo, and that's kind of like how you get that effect. So that's pretty simple. The other thing is you can see this water droplet is over the actual logo. The reason that's happening and the way I got that to happen is I actually just scaled the logo right up against the glass. So I made sure that it was right behind the water drop. That way it looked like it was actually part of the glass. So the precision needed for that is super important. So just make sure you guys put that logo really nice and snug against your glass to get that effect. All right, so how did I make this look 3D? And you're probably wondering, well, what do I mean by that? Well, before I had this all plugged in, and I'm going to go ahead and unplug it to show you the difference. Let me go ahead and back up a couple of frames. All right, so if I zoom in really far to the edge of this logo, notice how it's kind of highlighted. It's actually kind of hard to see. But believe it or not, there's a huge difference happening here. If I unplug this displacement socket, you'll notice that that completely disappears. Let me go ahead and plug it back in, show you the difference. Look at that. So what I did is I actually created a bump map in Photoshop with black and white pixels. So what I did is I actually took the logo and I just made an outline. Go ahead and see if I can actually find that. Yep, so just like this, as you guys can see, the original logo is right here, right? It's just a PNG with colored pixels. But if you go up here, you'll notice that I took the same image and I just gave it a black overlay with a white outline. Now, what Blender does is it then takes that black and white data, and you can see I chose non-color right here, and it actually interprets it as height. Well, in this case, I'm actually plugged into the height. I'm plugged into the normal, but it should work the same way. And it actually will make that edge kind of pop and look like it has some dimension. Believe it or not, this really sells the effect of your bottle label. So this was one of those things that when I figured out how to do it, and I know you guys maybe already knew how to do this, I just thought it really pushed it to the next level. And if you zoom in, you can really notice how pronounced it is on certain letters, especially like right here, you can kind of tell this would look otherwise really flat. And right here, you can see the highlighted areas. This would look otherwise flat if I did not do that. Now, I'm super zoomed in right now, so you can see that it's pixelated. If you guys want it to be even more realistic, just go ahead and raise the resolution of your image. In my case, I was actually zoomed out enough where it still looked good. But the image size of the logo does matter, guys. The image size matters so much because if you're using an image that's maybe like 500 by 500 pixels, you're going to get pixelation. That's the way it works. And the further and more zoomed in you are to your logo, the less likely that you're going to be able to sell that effect. You can see that I've tested this out. Like when I zoom in, like right here, this looks fantastic. And the reason it looks fantastic is because it's such a high quality image. And of course, there's water drops and roughness variations. There's a lot going on here, guys, to sell this effect. But the most important thing, I would argue, other than the roughness, is the actual bump on the edge. Right here. You can really see it right here. So guys, super important. That's something I wanted to show you. When you add a logo to anything, you absolutely should try to use this effect because it looks really nice. So that's like another little detail that I added that I really thought you guys would appreciate. Another thing that a lot of people ask me about are like my camera settings. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys. I actually have 3 cameras set up. I have a wide shot, which is of course just kind of zoomed out. You can see the whole bottle. I have my close-up shot, which is to kind of capture that logo, the carbonation, and the water droplets. But what really helps sell this close-up shot is the depth of field. I have that checked on over here. Now, instead of selecting a focus object, I first set up my camera and then I fine tune it. Now, I don't fine tune it in render view because it would take too long and it's slow. I actually go to material preview. And then when you actually slide these things around, like our distance, you can see that I can easily fine tune where my f-stop starts and stops. Right here, I found that 0.52 was pretty much perfect. Now, I am using a perspective lens, so you're going to want to use that if you want something a little bit more realistic. I'm using a focal length of 57.2. You guys can use whatever you want. Just keep in mind, you don't want to use something that's like, 500, because that wouldn't really be a realistic lens size. This would be a semi-realistic lens size. I believe typically it's like 50 millimeters. You can really see the pronounced effect of the logo right here and the edge of the logo. So I just wanted to point that out. It would not look like that if I didn't have the bump map. But that is how you achieve that depth of field. So you're just going to want to kind of adjust your f-stop and the distance that your camera sees. Now, I actually do have depth of field enabled on my wide shot. If you go really close to the beginning, you'll notice the bottle is actually out of focus. And I did that on purpose because I wanted it to slowly come into focus towards the end and be very pronounced. And I thought it looked really nice. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our other shot. I actually have a shot that's animated from the like downward angle all the way up. So it starts kind of like at the bottom here, and it just goes up. And this is kind of showcase that frost, the carbonation, the water droplets, and just the details of the bottle itself. So those are the 3 shots. Let's see. I went over the lighting for you guys. I went over the modeling for the most part. You can see I have my camera set up here. I have 3 area lights, a back plate. Let's see if I was right about the HDRI that I chose. Yep, I chose a studio HDRI. There's really not a lot to model. And the other thing that I can't give you guys is the geometry nodes for the actual condensation. Again, I will link that in the description below. I believe that's almost everything. I don't think I missed anything, guys. Let's see. Go ahead and click on our liquid. I might have missed the material for the liquid. I think there was probably more to go over about that. Go ahead over to the shading tab. Yeah. All right, guys, apologies. I did actually miss something there. So in this case, and again, I know we're not in our other document that I created for the tutorial, but it's kind of just easier to show you with the completed document. Go ahead and make a new material. You'll just make a glass shader, and then you can go ahead and plug in a volume scatter node. Now, what I did here to kind of add to this is I actually used a color ramp to kind of give it a little bit of variation. And then some basic mapping. Again, this is a really simple material, but the volume scatter really is what sells this. If I unplug this, you can kind of see the difference. It just doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as delicious. For some reason, when you have that volume scatter in there, it just really, really adds to the effect of the liquid. You don't have to do this. You can just stick to your typical color with a glass shader. Totally up to you. And other than that, guys, I believe there's just one more thing that I didn't talk about yet. And I believe it is the carbonation at the top. So I apologize. This is the one thing I was going to miss. So there's actually carbonation happening at the top here. Let me go ahead and play it back so you guys can see this. So this is actually a really, really simple setup. All that's happening is we actually have a cylinder. I cut off the bottom of the cylinder, and I just added a particle generator that would have particles that would die very quickly. So if you look here, these are actually all the settings I used. And I just targeted a sphere or an icosphere. I shaded it smooth, and I used that as my actual particle system. And then the lifetime was 100, and I just had it go all the way up to frame 200. I also increased the randomness of the lifetime, and I did bake the particle system. That's kind of really important, guys. Now, let me show you what's like actually happening here. Get a rendered view. If I zoom in here, it's kind of hard to see unless you're on the outside of the bottle, but believe it or not, these bubbles do add to the effect. If I really, really zoom in here, you can see that the bubbles build up on the top surface of the water. So I would highly suggest adding that. You guys don't have to. I don't want to go into it too much because it's gonna, for people who don't have very powerful computers, it might bog your computer down a little bit. But you guys are more than welcome to copy all of these particle settings. All it is just spheres appearing and reappearing. And they're kind of like deleting themselves as they go. So it's kind of like bubbles popping on the surface. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's how I made this cool bottle animation. Let's go over some of the final renders so I can show you guys how it came out. Wow. Actually, this one didn't come out right. I think that was not the correct one. There we go. You can see as I shuffle through here that it looks really good. And you can kind of see the bubbles on the surface there. You can see the carbonation, the logo. Look at how the logo really looks like it has dimension to it. I think it looks fantastic, guys. So that's pretty much it, guys. I will be selling this file on Gumroad It's very well organized. You can see I have my hierarchy up here with some folders. Of course, if you guys just want to follow the tutorial, that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, if you want to save yourself some time and you really want to have this exact lighting setup for your scene, you're more than welcome to buy this. It's going to be a template that I'll be selling on Gumroad. I'm going to try to link the geometry nodes add-on below. I'm also going to be linking the images that I use for like the roughness maps and things like that. And if you guys really want to, let me know. I can email you the actual blend juice PNG because I did custom make that in Photoshop. I want to thank you guys so much for watching today. I really do appreciate it. Please subscribe if you guys like content like this. Again, I managed to find some time today to do this for you guys, and I've been meaning to get back into my tutorials. So thank you guys for being so patient. The next tutorial I'll probably do is one of the Instagram Reels that I have on my Instagram page. And that is the one where the spheres kind of bounce into each other. There's a little Google logo. There's a few things going on there physics-wise that I know you guys want covered. So that'll probably be one of the next tutorials that I do cover. In the meantime, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you turn those notifications on so you don't miss my next video. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.